Ladies and gentlemen, before we get underway, if I could ask if you have one of these things, if you could put it to silent or turn it off, that'd be much appreciated. Help things to go a little smoothly today. Express our gratitude to Lyndall for that lovely piano playing. Thank you. All right, good afternoon and welcome to today's service. Today we gather to remember the life of David Charles Firth, a husband, a father, a brother, an uncle, and a wonderful friend to those that knew him. I want to thank you for being here today as we gather to remember his life, to reminisce, to share a laugh, maybe share a tear. And I want to thank you for your expressions of love and condolences this afternoon. I know that your presence here today means a lot to Lockett, David's wife Lockett, to his children Catherine and Andrew and their families, to his sisters, and to those close to him. And so on their behalf, I'd like to thank you for coming along this morning as we gather to remember his life. While your presence here today is an encouragement, it's also a source of comfort. We gain some comfort today and over the coming days and weeks from those who have suffered loss before, from those who have experienced the pain of losing a loved one. We draw alongside Lockett and the family and we comfort as we've been comforted. If you've lost a loved one, you may have some idea of what they're going through. And because of that, you can provide that comfort through a hug, a kind word, or even just being near. And so your presence today is a comfort. Thank you. David's passing has left a void that will not be easily filled. And so again, thank you for being here and for loving on the family today. Will you join me as we offer a brief prayer? Our Father in heaven, we thank you for the opportunity that is ours today to both remember David and pay tribute to him. We pray, Father, that you be with each one and that they will be comforted as we go through this service today. Bless our time together, Father. This is our prayer through Jesus' name. Amen. I'm going to read a poem, As Good as New, by Henry Lawson. Oh, this is a song of the old lights that came to my heart like a hymn. And this is a song for the old lights, the lights that we thought grew dim. That came to my heart to comfort me, and I pass it along to you. And here's a hand to the good old friend who turns up as good as new. And this is a song for the campfire out west where the stars shine bright. Oh, this is a song for the campfire where the old mates yarn tonight. Where the old mates yarn of the old days and their numbers are all too few. And this is a song for the good old times that will turn up as good as new. Oh, this is a song for the old foe. We've both grown wiser now. And this is a song for the old foe. And we're sorry we had that row. And this is a song for the old love, the love that we thought untrue. Oh, this is a song for the dear old love that comes back, as good as new. Oh, this is a song for the black sheep that fled from town. And this is a song for the brave heart that lived it down. And this is a song for the battler who sees it through. And this is a song for the broken heart that turns up as good as new. This is a song for the brave mate. Be he bushman, Scot or Russ. A song for the mates we'll stick to, for the mates who have stuck to us. And this is a song for the old creed, to do as a man should do, till the Lord takes us all to a wider world, where we'll turn up as good as new. Sadly, I didn't know David very well. Didn't get to meet him. But from visiting with Lockett and Kath and Andy, I'm really excited for you guys to hear a little bit more about him, as they let us know a little bit more about the man that they call Dad. Thanks, guys.
One copy?
That'll do.
I think so too.
Well, g'day. Just in case some of you don't know me, I'm Andy. I'm his son.
And I'm Kath, or some of you know me as Feety. And I'm the one who moved abroad quite a while ago now to live in Sussex in England. And due to the distance, it's a bit of a way, sadly my husband Rupert and daughters Am and Nen are not able to be physically here with us today, though they are watching potentially via live streaming. It is 4 a.m. over there, so hello if you are.
Hello, and thank you for gathering with us here today. We, Mum, Kath and I, appreciate you coming and supporting us and honouring Dad.
Ironically, back in November 2021, when I was here on my long overdue visit, in part thanks to COVID international travel bans, I spoke to Mum and Dad about their wishes once they were dead. I know, what a cheery topic, right? Dad unwaveringly told me that he absolutely did not want a funeral. By deduction, we had therefore believed he also did not want a eulogy either. I expect you might now, therefore, be wondering, so why are we gathered here today? So let's cover that off to begin with. After Dad was admitted to hospital on the 15th of March, he was literally gravely ill and not really able to talk. On the Thursday evening, he somehow summoned the strength to construct the following sentence and speak it to Mum. Don't forget to call the funeral parlour. Rather an interesting sentence considering previous relevant conversations. So Mum, always loyal to Dad, appropriately called them.
We hope our interpretation of that simple sentence, that was pretty much Dad's last self-constructed sentence, was his dying wish. We misinterpreted it, Dad. Sorry, mate. This is definitely a clear case of being easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. We start with a quote. If you're going to do something, do it once and do it properly. This has been attributed to several great scholars and orators, but for Kath and I, it was something Dad coined when we were young and repeated constantly and consistently to us.
Right then, Dad. No pressure on us today then, is there? We hope we do this well and honour you well. We, of course, would rather have been able to make you well at any time over the past 49 years if we could have. But that was not something we had any control over, unfortunately. Come on in. So here we are. It's actually got and breathe, so I just might, if that's okay. Right then, we have set the scene, and now on with the show. What do Lord Nelson, a wisteria walk, Mozart, five-star hospitality, a barbecue, and a damn fine single malt Scotch whisky all have in common? Of course, you all know the answer. Our dad, your David.
Dad had many passions, many loves. If you will, Mum was of course at the top of the list. But talking about that is not for today. So what came next? Looking around their current home and recalling their homes over the years along with our childhood home, there are many obvious clues as to what Dad was passionate about. We'll cover these, but also we want to share a few things that not even Kath or I knew before preparing for today.
Dad obviously had a significant thirst for knowledge. There are books and magazines aplenty in their home in Erina. To be honest, as far as the three of us can recall, Andy, Mum and I, Dad has always been surrounded by books, magazines and newspapers. In fact, while Dad might have had what many would consider to be a desirably small carbon footprint due to all the travel he sadly did not get to do, my goodness, we really might have to plant a few forests to replace those used to produce all the books he has read and collected over the years. Devouring words was definitely a passion, there is no doubt about that. However, it is even more specific than that. Dad, especially since moving to the coast in 1991, really only read stories written as factual accounts of events, people, or things. Actually, let's pause. I'd like to correct myself there, as he also read a certain newspaper cover to cover most days of his adult life. And if, like me, you think that newspapers don't always report the truth, then we do have to take note of that. Anyway, ignoring that little digression, Dad loved reading, as he called it, reading a good yarn, and often would have 4 or 5 books on the go simultaneously. To me, it also seemed that the chunkier books did not deter him one bit. In fact, they possibly even spurred him on. Autobiographies, biographies, military accounts, historical references, and of course in the Scone days especially, gardening books. You name it, they all gave him great pleasure. As a very interesting side note, Dad is one of the few non-Islamic people I know who has read the Quran, cover to cover. Hats off to you, Dad. That is impressive. There are 2 other levels of impressiveness we have deduced from all this reading and acquiring of knowledge that we think are worth sharing. Firstly, according to his sisters, both here with us today, Dad was not a scholar at school, rather preferring to apply his energies to sport, notably football and tennis amongst others. More on the tennis shortly. Secondly, his quest for ever more knowledge was matched by his astounding ability to accurately recall the information he was devouring, even dates, names and references, up until very recently. So to become such an avid reader of fact in his adult years and to be able to remember it all really is remarkable, we think. Sadly, I still do not know how he was able to read 5 books at the same time and not get them mixed up when telling someone about something he found fascinating in one or other of them. Again, hats off to you, Dad. For me, I thank you for this passion, Dad, and Mum also, as she shared it with you. This passion has rubbed off on me as I too have acquired a fascination for a true inspirational story. Sorry, Dad, I really am not yet there with the military tombs that you loved. They still remain a step too far for me.
Another great passion of Dad's was the land. A city boy at heart he was not. He was country to the core. While most of his childhood and school years were spent in Sydney, he looked and found opportunity to go rural any time he could. Even during his school holidays, Dad would head off to the bush and stay with his aunt and uncle, who, ironically, just had a little property outside of Scone. It was Scone where Dad took his passion for the land and really let loose, creating one of the town's more notable gardens at 64 Barton Street. What a home that became. Thank you, Uncle Jeff, for designing such a cool building that we called home. The big white house on the hill. And what a garden that block matured into. Through Dad's devotion and attention, to me it seemed that every weekend after Dad finished his working week, at lunchtime on Saturday, after we had lunch at the kitchen table as a family, Dad would take me and sometimes Mum and Kath into the yard and till the land, build the rockeries, wisteria walk, plant natives, hydrangeas, rose gardens, shrubberies, camellia groves, you name it, we had it. Dad's garden probably had at least one. He even very lovingly and tenderly planted and agonised over a blue spruce, which he was determined to grow, despite this tree being native to the mountain ranges of Colorado, which is a very different climate to Scone. It survived. It didn't get very big, but it survived. I look back with the benefit of hindsight on the days when I was a boy, unenthusiastically helping Dad from early morning till sundown each Sunday at least, out in the backyard, building, planting, weeding, mowing and all the rest, as the first bit of a pathway being laid to help me find my own passion for the land. Even Dad's thoughtful purchase of a ride-on mower did not make the task of all that mowing any more enjoyable beyond the first couple of goes, which, yeah, they were fun. We had an acre that required mowing, and doing that by hand was anything but fun in the summer of Scone. A little side note, Mum and I distinctly recall a funny little story about a long-life family friend from the city visiting us, who perhaps had no need for a ride-on mower of their own, having a try on one of ours, Uncle Jeff. Perhaps you can recall your first go on our ride-on. There was one less tree in the yard that night. Another side note, I'm so pleased for Dad that according to images provided on Google Earth, the front yard at 64 still has the front melaleuca hedge we planted and the native garden too. Also, while the magnificence of that garden was definitely largely down to Dad's physical labours, it was also thanks to endless watering by us all, until Dad and I put in an extensive irrigation system. I think we only had to turn 4 taps on and everything was watered.
Well done. Another great passion of Dad's was his love of music. Many of us here, I am sure, also have such a passion. I certainly do. I remember Dad as being very broad in his music appreciation during our childhood. He liked opera, and opera. And on rainy days, perhaps some classical or Scottish or Irish folk songs, courtesy of the likes of Val Doonigan, who remembers him, right, and his contemporaries was allowed. While I slightly jest here, it is actually only slightly. Dad loved to listen to opera, and often it was the big, rambunctious kind, not the gentle, easy listening kind. So rainy days, yeah? And there weren't many rainy days in Scone in the 1970s and 80s. Over the years, his taste did soften as he developed an appreciation for what I call more easy listening opera and classical music. This was much to the relief of Mum's ears and to my delight, as it was through this period that I started to fall for the beauty and the serenity of a good Rachmaninoff or Mozart myself. It is interesting to reflect on what we get through nature versus nurture, isn't it? From my reflections of late, I can definitely thank Dad for awakening and tuning in my ears to much more than the popular music of my generation. Thank you, Dad. We really do hope that you approve of the music we are playing in your honour today. And Linda, you did a stunning job. Thank you very much.
During the past week or so, as we've gathered information together to share with you today, we've learned a couple of fun facts about Dad. Apparently, he was a very cheeky bloke, particularly in his childhood.
There is a story about when Dad's mother Mildred was pregnant with her third child. Dad and his older sister Robin were being tucked up in bed for the night not long before baby number 3 was due. Dad rubbed his mother's tummy, saying, "Good night, fat lady," with a great big grin on his face. Even at 5 years old, he had a good sense of humour, which stayed with him throughout his life. Although his older sister Robin, who recalled this story to us, is sure that he did not know that it was a baby causing the bulge. The baby, of course, being Jude.
It seems to us, talking with our aunts about Dad in his early years, that Dad's childhood was a happy one. While there might not have been very much money around as they grew up, the parents somehow made it stretch to give Dad and his sisters the important things. Dad's father apparently became a notable grower of vegetables. Back in the days, post-World War II, perhaps it was a case of needs must. Perhaps, like my experience, Dad was conscripted into being his father's young labourer, rather than eagerly volunteering. We only now have conjecture to go on, but something definitely happened with those veggies, as while the Firth household, as well as all households in the neighbourhood, feasted on fresh salad and veg, even for breakfast on occasion. Dad, as we knew him, would not plant a vegetable garden, no matter how much Mum asked. Instead, his advice was along the lines of, if you want vegetables, you can easily get them from the grocers in town, darling. Again, a silver lining to that cloud. Dad made up for this by ensuring Mum always had access to homegrown flowers for her vases. According to our lovely aunts, Dad's older and younger sister, Dad took after his own father, Charles. As a young boy and then as a young man, he was gregarious, good-looking, charming. Like his father, he had the gift of the gab. He also had a very pleasant-sounding speaking voice, which he used to good effect in the debating team at Sydney Grammar.
Another little ditty, according to one of Dad's early girlfriends, he had the longest eyelashes in the world. This comment about Dad's eyelashes I found particularly fascinating, as my two daughters, Am and Nen, were both born with rather lush, magnificent eyelashes. As the same has actually never been said of mine, nor of my husband Rupert's. I used to put it down to all the cucumber I ate during pregnancy. How wonderful to learn that our girls potentially inherited that physical characteristic from their grandpa. I like that.
Another fun fact we learnt was one that one day, as Dad was learning the ropes in his first post-school job in Sydney at AML&F's head office, he took a phone call from a female customer in rural Queensland who required a smart outfit for herself for a rather important function she was attending. She apparently gave Dad the authority to select on her behalf all the items she would need, which he did, packaged them up and posted them off to said customer. The story goes on to confirm that the lady called back and spoke with Dad on receipt of the package and thanked him for his selection. She was delighted to report fitted and was perfect for the occasion. Times really were different. Dad's cousin, Helen, shared with us a lovely anecdote. Apparently, when she was just old enough to go out and about in Sydney as a young lady, Dad decided to show Helen and her friend what the nightlife in Sydney was all about at the time. The night began respectfully enough, but as Helen says, Dad was the first person to lead her and her friend astray. He took them to several clubs in the Cross and ensured there was much dancing and merriment until the wee hours, all fuelled along with the aid of a lovely selection of cocktails. On your Dad.
Let's skip a bit, we're running really late.
Now, as kids, we were taught to play tennis. Perhaps the same was true for you in your youth. Tennis was sold to both Kath and I as an important life skill. It wasn't optional. We were told that tennis was unique and it would most likely be the only sport we would play throughout our entire lives and was a great way to meet people wherever we went. So for many years, on the tennis court on Saturday mornings is where you would find us. We both recall enjoying these times, especially the tennis instructor getting all the kids onto the one court for community tennis. Again, it was only through pulling this information together for today that we learned that the tennis fixation did not solely come from Mum. She was lucky and grew up with a tennis court, and apparently Dad was also a keen tennis player in his youth. It seems they both equally wanted us to master the game. Dad spent much of his childhood years, when not in school, riding off on his bike to go and play the tennis or other sport with his mates, much to the envy of his younger sister being left at home. Kath and I have racked our memories and neither of us can ever recall seeing Dad swing a racket or ride a bike.
Okay, I'm going to skip a bit ahead here.
Okay. Dad was what you might refer to as one heck of a good bloke. Due to some really unfortunate cards being dealt to him in the prime years of his life, Kath and I only ever saw snippets of the man some of you with us today knew in the before accident years. Mum describes him as the life and soul of any party, as well as a wonderful dancer. Other friends have commented to us that him and Mum's hospitalities were always 5-star. Others have noted his ability to talk to anyone and everyone without distinction. Many of you have commented on his loyalty and ability to maintain friendships without the aids of mobiles and Facebook and all the stuff we have today.
Another little ditty. It was not uncommon for customers to queue at Flint's, waiting where Dad worked when we were living in Scone, waiting patiently to be served by him rather than somebody else. I pause on this to highlight that Flint's was a rather large corrugated iron glorified shed. Scone, weather. Freezing in winter and an oven in summer. So to patiently wait rather than hurry out of there really does speak volumes about our dad, his ability to connect with people and the lasting impressions he made. This one and then we'll finish up.
During our childhood years at Barton Street, Dad and Mum would throw some rather large parties. Some of you here, I hope, remember them well. Friends would come from all over the district and all be served steak and other assorted beautifully barbecued meat, a glorious bountiful variety of salads and desserts, all homemade by Mum, and of course a good drop or two of wine. They really did love looking after others. Kath and I, of course, had a slightly tainted view of these gatherings of easily 60 or more people. I was on the barbecue for hours and Kath was sous chef to Mum, and chief waitress and washer-upper. Her personal recollections are that everyone was served their feast on china plates with proper cutlery, no disposable plates or utensils for our guests.
So it is perhaps time to draw this yarn to a close. One of Dad's dear friends suggested to me that we approach this task as a way to reacquaint ourselves with Dad as the person, not as the man in great pain as we knew him for most of our lives. I can honestly say that felt harsh advice at the beginning of this process, but has become a wonderful outcome. Thank you, Nanette.
As to how Dad made it to 84, all things considered, it's astounding. He was never one to rail against the hand he'd been dealt. Why me? Was not in his vocabulary. I'm fine, he'd say when you asked him. If the voice gave him away, you'd play along and pretend not to notice. But he was anything but fine.
Perhaps, as many of you here possibly believe, Dad lasted the distance because love kept him going. His love for Mum and her love and devotion for him, which never wavered on either side. Perhaps for another day that is a love story worth telling, and one that perhaps should be told as an inspirational reference guide. And then there was Dad's great love for his family, his interest in and care for the wider world, and even for life itself, which could surely have smiled a little more kindly on such a brave-hearted man. He was the epitome of a trustworthy and honourable gentleman, is what someone quoted to me. Wherever he went and whatever he did, he really was a class act.
Sadly, Kath and I did not know him in the way many of you did. To us, he was our dad, someone we loved dearly and, of course, absolutely. But also someone who was sometimes challenging to be around due to the consistency of his physical pain and the limitations and frustrations that came with it. But today, of course, is a day for remembering some of the good times.
So we hope you have enjoyed hearing what we have shared, and that the next time you read a good book, listen to a beautiful concerto, admire a gorgeous flower, or take a stroll in a tranquil rural setting, you might think of Dad, of David. Give him a nod, a silent hello, for he really was a remarkable, I think you say in Australia, bloke, wasn't he?
Rest comfortably, Dad. Rest comfortably. You can be fine now.
All right, we're going to take a moment now to pause and reflect on the stories that we've just heard as we listen to some music. The stories that draw pictures in our minds of the man who had such an impact on so many. Thank you, Matt. Thank you. Mike Young is going to read us The Dancer's End. Thank you, Mike.
The Dancer's End by Enoch Powell. My hand is on the lamp to put it out, but still I linger, tasting this content that nightly comes before the swift descent of unreflecting sleep, where every doubt and desperation of daytime's bout against impossibility is spent, and hopes that persecuted me relent. So it is dark, I sigh, and turn about. Father, to thee and to thy father's past now I return. This moment that you knew, as welcome foretaste to the grave's delight, unites me in eternity with you. It promises me entrance on your night, with joy and sweet contentment at the last.
Thank you, Mike. Abraham Lincoln once said, "In the end, it's not the years in a life, it's the life in the years." From what's been shared today, we know that despite a life-changing physical tragedy, David had a lot of life in his years. No one can live for over 84 years and not have some impact on those around them. And we've been blessed to hear about some of those this afternoon. We can't think of David's death without thinking about our own mortality, maybe even resolving to live a fuller, more meaningful life of our own. His passing reminds us that we won't live forever and causes us to reflect a little. Are there any things we need to change? Do we need to reconsider our priorities so that we can make the most of the time we have left? Can we learn from David that relationships with family and friends are the most important things in life? I want to again thank you for your presence here today, and I hope that our time together brings us a little closer to each other and brings each one of us a degree of comfort as we pay tribute to and remember David's life. The family would like to extend an invitation to refreshments and reminiscing at the Ourimbah RSL Club on the Pacific Highway at Ourimbah. Please note the club's on one side, but the car park's on the other side of the highway. So if you take a right-hand turn at the first set of lights as you're going into Gosford, Dogtrap Road, and then right off the first roundabout, it'll take you straight into the car park. And we'll see you there. Thank you, Matt.